Hey there, my fellow designers and creatives. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to a brand new video on the channel. This video is going to be quite interesting and very unique. I've never done a video in this format, so hopefully you guys enjoy it, because in this video we're going to learn how to improve your problem solving and critical thinking skills. A couple of weeks ago, I uploaded this video about the impact of Figma AI, and in that I spoke about the three most important skills that are going to be very needed for everybody who wants to become or build a successful career in product design. And I'm going to quickly recap what those skills are. The first one is about critical thinking. And what does critical thinking mean? It's basically knowing what questions to ask. The better of a critical thinker you are, the better quality of the questions you're going to ask and the more quantity of questions you're going to ask. The next is going to be articulation, and what this basically means, it's knowing how to ask or answer a particular question. It's not about grammar or English, it's about how do you effectively communicate a question, make the other person understand what you're asking and why you're asking something. And this also holds good for answering something that somebody asked you for. And finally is problem solving, right? And this is basically what do you do with the answers that you got and how can you take that and solve a particular problem. Now, to learn all of this, we're basically going to be using ChatGPT. Now, I know what everybody's going to say. I already have 3 videos using ChatGPT, and these are actually really good videos, and I highly recommend everybody to watch it if you haven't watched it yet. There's so much you can learn. But in this video, I'm going to be doing something that's going to be very different than these 3 videos, and I'm going to explain what that is. So let's take an example. Let's assume you are the blue dot, and then you have ChatGPT on the right. Essentially, what you would do is you would have a question which is represented by this yellow dot, and you want the answer to this question, right? You want some help. And what you will essentially do is ask ChatGPT for the answer to that. And ChatGPT is going to take your question and is going to come up with an answer, and then it's going to give that answer to you. And once you take the answer, you're going to come up with another question and you're going to ask it again. So this becomes a very transactional and a very linear flow. Now, the biggest problem with this is that you're lacking 2 things. The first one is the environment. And what this means is that a lot of people may have never been in the actual environment that you witness in really good product companies where you work with really smart product managers and engineers and leadership, right? And also, it's about brainstorming and putting yourself in an environment where you come up with really good solutions. Of course, junior designers or people who have never actually gotten a job will never experience what this environment is. The closest you will come to this is probably in a half-an-hour interview or a 45-minute whiteboarding session. And that's actually the point where they're going to test you, right? So you've never actually had any experience of being in an environment, and suddenly when you put in an environment, you don't know how to critically think, you don't know how to articulate, and you don't know how to problem solve. The second thing is basically feedback. As a junior designer, it's going to be very hard for you to actually get really good, solid feedback. And even people who are junior designers in companies, if you're not working in a really good product company, you're not going to get sufficient feedback. So how do we try to get good feedback and put yourself in an environment with ChatGPT? We're going to be using the new voice feature that's there in ChatGPT-4o. And I'm going to show you how to make the best use of it. It's going to be very interesting. So hopefully you guys will enjoy it. So this is how it's going to go. So this is again you. You're the blue circle. And what you do is you have a question. Now what essentially you should do is before you ask that to ChatGPT, you need to come up with a solution yourself. And this is where you actually have to focus on your skills and not go to ChatGPT for the answer. You have to think of the answer yourself. And this time, when you think of the answer yourself, you want to go ahead and validate it. So not only have you thought of the answer, but you also want feedback on your thinking. And then you will ask ChatGPT for feedback by providing it the answer. So you give it context, you tell this is the answer, and you ask ChatGPT to give you feedback and question you on your design thinking. And ChatGPT is going to go ahead and give you feedback on all of it. And not just that, it's probably going to give you a lot of additional questions or additional considerations to think about as well. So you asked one question, but you got more information. And ChatGPT is going to give you all of that. And then what you will do is you will be in a situation where you will have a lot of things to think about. It's the feedback that you got plus other things to think about. And what then you will do is you will go ahead and come up with answers to that. So you're going to think on your own, and you're going to come up with the answers to that. So essentially, ChatGPT is not really giving you answers, it's only validating and telling you where you're wrong and challenging you on your design thinking. And when you're coming up with these solutions to the questions ChatGPT asked, at times you will also come up with more questions. You'll be like, oh, maybe I should think about this. Oh, actually, I think I should think about that as well, right? And then you're going to go ahead and come up with answers to that as well. So these are questions that you came up on your own when you were trying to answer the questions that ChatGPT gave you. And then you want feedback on all of it. So you give that to ChatGPT. So what this basically means is you went from a state where you had one question, one answer, and feedback, and you wanted feedback on that, and you ended up in the situation that you can see on the right side where you have a lot more things. So one question or one conversation with ChatGPT translated to a lot more. And the more you do this, the bigger this circle is going to be. And what essentially this means is that this will help in building structure to your thinking. And slowly, you're going to start building context. This is going to become a habit, right? And over time, it becomes muscle memory. So to be a great thinker, if you constantly keep thinking in a certain way, your brain is automatically going to think of that normally. That's just going to become so normal for you, and that will become muscle memory. And that's how you end up building good problem solving and critical thinking skills. It's when you are challenged, it's when you are questioned, and it's when you're forced to come up with answers on your own. And here's an interesting thing. Have you ever wondered what you could have done better in a whiteboarding round? Maybe you got rejected, or maybe you think you didn't do a good job, or maybe there was a problem statement that was thrown at you randomly in an interview, and you didn't think you did a good job. You can actually come to ChatGPT and make it behave like the interviewer and put yourself in that situation again and see how you could have done things a little bit better. And I'm going to show you how to do all of that. So in this video, what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to take one of this problem statement that I recently uploaded on my Instagram. By the way, if you want really good, interesting problem statements to work on, you can check out my Instagram and I have a lot of them. I'm going to take this one problem statement, which is basically designing an all-in-one app that helps you eat healthy food, right? I'm going to take this as a core problem statement and I'm going to use the new ChatGPT-4o and make it behave like the interviewer or a product manager that's going to question you and challenge you and solve this entire problem. And by the end of the video, you should have a pretty good set of things for you to look at and understand how a problem is solved. And what I will do is if you go ahead and take that research and design screens or probably even the entire app, and if you send me a Figma file for it, I would love to review it. And I think I've never done this before, but this is basically an open invitation to everyone. So if you go ahead and design screens, I will review it. Just a quick note, I want to make it very clear that the chances of me reviewing your work is going to be a lot higher if you have polished screens, because I don't want to give feedback on UI. I think I want to focus on UX and problem solving skills and really good design patterns and interaction design. So make sure your screens are very polished. So with that being said, let's jump in and see how to do all this. All right. So here's a problem statement that we're going to be solving. People struggle to access clear and accurate nutritional information about their food, leading to uninformed dietary choices. Create a user-friendly app that provides detailed nutritional information, helping users make informed and healthier eating decisions. Now I'm going to feed this to ChatGPT and let's see how it goes on from there. So I'm going to come over here and click on this to start a new conversation. Hey ChatGPT. So I'm actually practicing a problem statement for a whiteboarding round that I have next week with a company. The role is for a senior product designer. And what I want you to do is I want you to help me solve this problem statement. But at the same time, I want you to be the interviewer who's sort of judging me and challenging me and my decisions. Is that something that you can do?
Absolutely. I can help with that. What's the problem statement you're working on?
The problem statement is as follows. People struggle to access clear and accurate nutritional information about their food, leading to uninformed dietary choices. Create a user-friendly app that provides detailed nutritional information, helping users make informed and healthier eating decisions.
That's a great problem statement. Let's start by defining the scope and key goals of the app. How do you envision the app addressing the problem of accessing clear and accurate nutritional information?
So, as we saw, it basically sort of told me what is the first step that I need to do. But essentially what you want to do is you want to go ahead and set up a process yourself. Now, the process is usually pretty straightforward over here. We have a couple of standard steps that we follow. This is how I solve the problem statement. So this is the design process that I came up with. So I'm going to start off by setting very high level goals, not diving into too much details, just to sort of understand what this app is supposed to do. And then we're going to define user personas. And then for each of the user personas, we're going to define user stories. And then once we understand user stories and user needs, we're going to then identify key features or solutions. And then once we have the solutions, we're going to define user flows. And then we're going to probably define the screen layout. Of course, we're not going to be doing any wireframing over here or designing screens, but we can at least think about the screen layout for some core screens, right? Now, one of the most important things here is that I've not spoken about metrics, right? And I'm going to wait for ChatGPT to see how it responds to this. And then I'm going to go ahead and talk about metrics. So let's feed this with ChatGPT. Hey, so before we actually go into talking about other things, I thought it made sense to sort of set up a design process. Let me know if this process makes sense or if you think I need to make any changes. So, and I'm only focusing on processes or steps in the process that is before I design a particular screen. So all of this I'm going to say is before the screen. So the first step is defining high-level goals. The second step is defining basic user personas. The third step is defining user stories for each of the personas. Step 4 is identifying key features or solutions based on the user stories. Number 5 is then creating user flows for each solution or feature or essentially the user stories. And the 6th would be to sort of decide the screen layout for a particular set of screens. What do you think about this? And feel free to challenge me if you think this is wrong.
Your design process looks solid and covers essential steps before diving into screen design. However, I have a few suggestions and questions to help refine it further. 1. For the high-level goals, how will you ensure they align with both user needs and business objectives? 2. When defining user personas, what sources of data will you use to make them accurate and representative? For your user stories, how will you prioritize them to focus on the most impactful ones first? 4. When identifying key features, how will you validate that these features address the user stories effectively? 5. In creating user flows, how will you ensure that the flows are intuitive and address any potential pain points? Considering these points might help you create a more robust design process. What do you think?
All right. So as you can see, it actually gave us a lot of additional inputs. And what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to go ahead and jot down everything that ChatGPT said, and then we're going to see how to move on from there. Okay, so this is the feedback ChatGPT gave. So let's go ahead one by one. So for the high-level goals, which is probably the first one, how will you ensure they align with both user needs and business objectives? Now, it's so amazing that ChatGPT is already finding out that I didn't speak about metrics over here. And so it's basically obviously asking about business objectives when I'm defining high-level goals, which is very smart for it to do. And honestly, this is something an interviewer in a whiteboarding round, probably your product manager also would probably ask you this, right? It's less likely a product manager would ask you this because they would know what metric they're measuring. But if somebody asks you this in an interview, in a whiteboarding round, you need to have the answer to this question. Or basically, you need to think about this as well. So now I need to go ahead and identify a solution to this. The next one, when defining user personas, what sources of data will you use to make them accurate and representative? I think this one is fine. We can sort of ignore this. This comes from a very methodical approach, so we don't really need to look into this. For user stories, how will you prioritize them to focus on the most impactful one first? And I think this is a great question, and a lot of people ask this question at the stage where you're defining user stories. How do we prioritize what to solve first? And I think this is a question that you need to answer. And the answer is not the same for every problem statement. The answer depends for every different problem statement. And once you have the list of user stories, you will then understand how to answer this, right? Because at the end of the day, you need to decide what is more impactful and how do you decide what is more impactful, right? Of course, you would prioritize the ones that are most impactful. So I'm just going to go ahead and quickly just probably underline this so that it catches your attention. All right. Then when identifying key features, how will you validate that these features addresses the user stories effectively? This is an excellent question Because what this question is asking is, how do you know that this solution will solve the problem, right? And maybe it's not relevant to answer this question right now, but obviously you can answer it when you're going ahead and talking about the key features, right? Somebody could ask it, how do you know that this feature or solution is going to solve the problem? And finally, in creating user flows, how will you ensure that the flows are intuitive and address potential pain points? Pretty much, the same as, the first three, right? So what you see over here is that you actually have a lot of things to think about even before you sort of proceed, right? And you don't need the answers now, but you need to keep thinking about this in the back of your mind. And the more problems you solve, the more obvious it will become that you have to think about these things, and nobody has to ask you this, right? You will think about the answers to these questions as and when you become better at problem solving, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and write all the answers and show it to you before I show it to ChatGPT. All right. So I've gone ahead and written down my answers to this, and I want everybody to pay attention to what I'm doing here. So for the high level goals, it basically asked what about user needs and business objectives? And I'm going to say I'm going to define core metrics and KPIs after defining key features, right? So I would probably set the step of defining the metrics after I design key features, because then I would have a much clearer idea. When defining user personas, what sources of data will you use? I'm just going to say I have a UX research team that's going to do the research for me. But obviously, you as the designer practicing this, you will probably have to do it all on your own. Or, you don't even have to go out and do extra research. If you have the knowledge, you should be able to do it yourself. For the most impactful stories, how will you prioritize them? And I'm going to say I'm going to focus later on after defining personas. And let's see what ChatGPT says to this, right? So after I define personas and define user stories, I will then think about how I'm going to prioritize them. When identifying key features, how will you validate that these features will address the stories effectively? Now, let's say that I don't know the answer to this, right? Let's see how ChatGPT will help me with the answer to this, all right? And the last one, when creating user flows, how will you ensure that the flows are intuitive and address any potential pain point? So here I'm going to say probably do usability testing before and get customer feedback after releasing the feature, right? And let's see what ChatGPT thinks of this. Hey, so I'm back with the answers to your questions. So the first question that you asked about high-level goals, where I need to consider both user needs and business objectives, I obviously thought it made sense to define core metrics or KPIs after defining the key features, all right? The second question was about when defining user personas, what sources of data will I use? I actually have a UX research team in the company, which is going to sort of help me get the answers to this. And then I will use that data to define the personas. The third one was about user stories and how I will prioritize the most impactful ones. I think I'll focus on that after I've defined the personas and user stories, and then I will decide how to identify what to prioritize. Let me know if that makes sense. The fourth one is when I'm identifying key features, how will I validate them? I'm not entirely sure. I would love for you to probably help me with the answer to this with a very nice example. And your fifth question was, in creating user flows, how will I ensure that they're intuitive and address any potential pain points? I have two ideas in mind. I would probably do some usability testing before we design this, build the screens and launch it with the public. And the second way was probably to get customer feedback after releasing the feature. Let me know if this makes sense and you think I should probably change my approach here.
Your responses make a lot of sense and show a thoughtful approach. Let's address your points and your query on validating key features with an example. 1. High-level goals and KPIs. Defining KPIs after identifying key features is a good approach, as it ensures alignment with the features that will drive the most value. You might want to set some preliminary KPIs early on to guide feature development and then refine them. 2. User personas. Leveraging your UX research team for accurate data is an excellent strategy. This will help ensure that your personas are grounded in real user behavior and needs. 3. Prioritizing user stories. It's perfectly fine to prioritize after defining user stories. You can use methods like the most cow method, must have, should have, could have, won't have, or impact versus effort matrices to help with prioritization. 4. Validating key features. One effective way to validate key features is through user testing with prototypes. For example, if one key feature is a barcode scanner for food items, you could create a clickable prototype of the feature and conduct usability tests. Observe how users interact with it, Ask them about their experience and gather feedback. This can help identify any issues or areas for improvement before development. 5. Creating intuitive user flows. Your approach to usability testing and gathering customer feedback is spot on. Early usability testing with wireframes or prototypes can catch major issues before development. Continuous feedback post-launch ensures you can iterate and improve based on real user interactions. Your process is robust, and these refinements should help ensure a smooth and user-focused design journey. Does this approach resonate with you, or is there any area you'd like to delve deeper into?
So obviously it gave us a lot of information, and sort of let's read into that, right? So I'm going to go back, and of course I can read everything that it gave me, right? So high level goals and KPIs, right? I'm just going to keep this on the side if you guys sort of want to refer this as well. Defining KPIs is a good approach, but you might want to set some preliminary KPIs early on to guide future development. So of course you go ahead and set some high level KPIs, and then you can go ahead and set smaller KPIs and sort of refine them, which is something a product manager would really actually say. And this is typically how it usually happens, right? But in this problem statement, I'm not going to define any KPIs right now. I'm going to decide that later because I might be completely wrong and I don't want to, say something that doesn't make sense. User personas, I think it was fine. It didn't really say anything about user personas. Prioritizing user stories. Now, I said that I would focus on later, but then it suggested that it's okay to prioritize after defining user stories. And it probably gave me a couple of ideas of how to prioritize it, which is fine, right? The next one is validating key features. And this is where I said that I don't really know what to do. And then so it said that one effective way is with user testing with prototypes, which is pretty much was the answer to the next question. For example, one of the features is a barcode scanner. You can do a clickable prototype, observe it, whatever, right? This is pretty straightforward, right? And I don't think you'll be asked this question if you're a senior designer. You should probably already know this and nobody's going to ask you this question. But as a junior, people might ask this question. And then creating intuitive user flows. Your approach to usability testing and gathering customer feedback is spot on. Early usability testing with wireframes, right? So it's fine. It's helpful. It's validating what you're saying, which is good, which is nice. But one of the most important things here to understand is that it is actually telling you the answers to potential questions somebody may ask you. And the more and more you read about this and you keep registering this in your brain, this will then become a part of your thinking pattern, right? And you will automatically start thinking about this without anybody questioning you, right? So what we can do now is we can go ahead and then clean up the design process by adding that one additional extra line. And then we can move on to the next step, which is defining high-level goals. All right, so I've gone ahead and put them side by side. So the new design process is basically going to have defining metrics after we create user stories. And I've also written down the high-level goals. So the high-level goals is basically provide information in a consumable format. I'm supposed to say in, okay. Provide information in a consumable format. Help people quickly understand what is healthy for them and what isn't, including quantity, right? And then provide detailed information if they want to get into the specifics, right? Now, this is very high level goal. It doesn't have to be very detailed, and you can obviously figure this out and make it a lot more crisp when you go on to user stories and you don't know who your users are. Now, let's run this with ChatGPT and see what it says. Hey, ChatGPT. So I'm going to start off by telling you what are the high level goals that I'm thinking about. And of course, again, feel free to question or challenge and suggest a couple of things if you think they are important. So I have only 3 high level goals. The first one is to provide information in a consumable format. The second one is to help people quickly understand what is healthy for them and what isn't, and including what quantity to consume it in. The third one is providing detailed information if somebody wants to get into the specifics of nutrition or other information. What do you think about this?
Those high-level goals are clear and address different aspects of the problem effectively. Here's a quick take on each. 1, consumable format. Ensuring that information is easy to digest is crucial. It means focusing on clear visuals, concise text, and possibly interactive elements. 2, understanding healthiness quickly. This is about making the app intuitive, so users can quickly identify healthy choices and understand portion sizes without digging through too much information. 3, detailed information. Providing an option for deeper dives into nutrition can cater to users who want more in-depth details, making the app versatile for different needs. Do these goals cover all aspects you want to tackle, or do you feel there's anything missing?
All right, so let's go ahead and just listen to what it said, or basically read what it said. So it actually gave us it in bullet points, which is a very nice way of doing it. So this is something that you can take away from. So high level goals, you provide the topic and then you go into the details, right? So ensuring the information is easy to digest is crucial. It means focusing on clear visuals, right? So it's basically just sort of giving you. So it's basically just validating you. This is about making the app intuitive so users can identify. This is again, it's validating, and then detailed information, right? Now it's asking me, do you feel if there's anything missing? Now, sometimes in whiteboarding rounds, when you've actually written things, you have the opportunity to sort of check with the interviewer if you're missing anything. And sometimes they do help you so that they want you to think in a certain perspective. And of course, when you do 80% of the work, they're willing to help you with the 20% of the work. So let's ask ChatGPT this and let's see what it says. So I'm going to open up the conversation again. Hey, thanks for validating the 3 goals. I was actually wondering if you could help me define any additional goals, very high level goals, or do you think these 3 are more than enough to proceed?
The 3 goals you've defined are quite comprehensive and should cover most of the core aspects of the app. However, you might consider adding a couple of additional high-level goals to ensure a well-rounded approach. 1. User engagement. Ensure the app engages users regularly, possibly through features like reminders, tips, or challenges to maintain a healthy diet. This can help with long-term user retention. 2. Personalization. Offer personalized recommendations based on user preferences, dietary restrictions, or health goals. This can enhance the user experience and make the app more relevant to individual needs. If these additional goals resonate with your vision, they might help further enhance the app's effectiveness. Does this align with your thoughts on what the app should achieve?
All right. So if you go back and read it, it gave us 2 things. The first one was basically user engagement, ensuring the app engages regularly through features like reminders. I think this should be essentially a core metric, or this is something that's pretty obvious, nothing really to write down. Obviously, it's an unspoken goal. Second one is personalization, which is something that we could definitely add over here. So offer personalized recommendations on user preferences and dietary restrictions. Now, of course, we would obviously think about personalization at some point. Maybe it's not really a high level goal, but it probably does make sense to add personalization as a high level goal, because that is something that we will work towards against, right? So as you can see over here, it's not only, validating what you're saying, suggesting if something is wrong, but it's also giving you more. And as and when you sort of have this conversation with yourself and ChatGPT, and you ask it and question it and ask it to challenge you, you're slowly going to start building your problem solving skills over and over. And of course, you're going to solve this for multiple problems and get the hang of it. You're going to get the hang of thinking, and you're going to get the hang of asking the right questions, right? So now let me go ahead and update the high level goals and also define the user personas, which is going to be the next step. All right, so as you can see, I added personalization as a high level goal here, and now I've also defined the user personas. Now, I've kept it very basic and straightforward, and I've kept it into 2 personas. The first one is somebody who generally wants to stay healthy, and I have some characteristics. Somebody who has basic knowledge of nutrition, and I think on an average, every human being has basic knowledge of nutrition. Things like, what is good in protein, what is good in carbohydrates, what is good for health, what is bad for health, oil, sugar. I think everybody has basic knowledge. The person also has no medical conditions, nothing very severe. Of course, some of them may have allergies, or, they might be vegans and, they can't, maybe they have lactose intolerance. All that is fine, but they don't have any severe medical conditions. And then they also don't have a strict diet plan, right? It's not that, they should not eat any junk and they should eat only healthy food. It's okay, but, they don't have a strict diet plan. The second one is somebody who has specific fitness goals or medical conditions, and this is someone who has very high knowledge of nutrition, who understand nutrition at a much better level, like macros and calorie counts and all these other things. It could also be someone who is probably going to the gym to bulk up or reduce weight, so they have some sort of a goal, or they have some medical conditions, right? They're recovering from an illness, they have a disease or something like that, right? And they also have a strict diet plan, right? So their needs are going to be a little different than these people, and we as the app designers and on the product team have to sort of help these people, right? Now, there are a couple more things. Now, I actually haven't taken into consideration age and gender and things like that. Now, I'm going to keep that aside and I'm going to ask ChatGPT what it thinks of that, right? And this is also a question that somebody would ask you, right? If somebody says, do you think we should consider things like age or gender? And if yes, why? And if no, why, right? So, somebody can ask you that question, right? So, I'm giving you guys the context and let's see what ChatGPT replies to it. Hey ChatGPT, thank you for the help. I want to move on to the next step, which is basically defining user personas. And I have two personas in mind. So the first persona is somebody who just generally wants to stay healthy. And what this means is that they have basic knowledge of nutrition. They don't have too much knowledge, but very high level knowledge of nutrition. They don't have any medical conditions. And what this means that they don't really have any ailments. Of course, they might have allergies and things like, being lactose intolerant. They might be vegans. They don't consume specific type of food, but no severe medical conditions. Number three is that they don't have any strict diet plan. They just want to generally stay healthy. They don't mind eating junk food once in a while, but they don't have a strict plan. The second persona is somebody who has specific fitness goals or has medical conditions. And typically, these are people who have high knowledge of nutrition. They also probably are bulking up or losing weight by going to the gym, and they're probably recovering from some illness or a disease, and they have some severe medical conditions. And these people also tend to have a strict diet plan. What do you think of this? And feel free to challenge any of these decisions. And if you think that I need to think more, let me know.
These personas are a good starting point and they address different user needs effectively. Here's a bit of feedback and a few considerations. 1. General health persona. This persona is broad and captures a common user segment. To refine it further, you might consider including details about their tech savviness and preferred ways to receive information, e.g., through visuals, text, or interactive content. This could influence the design choices for the app. 2. Fitness medical persona. This persona is more specialized and detailed. It's great that you've included fitness goals and medical conditions. You might also want to consider adding details about their preferred methods for tracking progress or how they like to receive detailed nutritional information. Understanding these preferences can help tailor features to their needs. One thing to think about is whether there are any common pain points or challenges these personas might face with existing apps. Addressing these specific issues can make your app more compelling. Overall, these personas provide a solid foundation. Just ensure to keep their goals, needs, and preferences in mind throughout the design process. Does this align with your approach, or is there something specific you want to adjust?
All right, so now let's go ahead and just sort of break that down, right? So, general health persona, right? And it's very nice that it actually gave some sort of a tagline, right? So it probably gives you a better way to structure your personas, but it's all right. So this persona is broad and captures a common user segment. And as you can see, it's pretty smart enough to identify that this is, a common user segment. To refine it further, you might want to consider including details such as tech savviness and preferred ways to receive information through visuals, text, or interactive content. This could help influence the design choice, right? Now, the most important thing here is the tech savviness, right? You can see it didn't talk about age and it didn't talk about gender, but it spoke about tech savviness, right? And we're going to talk about this age and gender topic again after we go through this, right? So tech savviness, definitely, right? And this is something that an interviewer might challenge you against and say, hey, are you sure that there is something else you want to think about? And also, they might, if they're kind enough, they might recommend things like this, right? So think about tech savviness. So what this means is next time you're working on a different problem statement, remember this, right? So you remember that tech savviness is something you want to think about in this case. And to be very honest, tech savviness makes a lot of sense because you have an entire age group, right? From people who are, youngsters, Gen Zs, in their, late 30s or 40s. And then you've got very old people, right? They also have medical conditions and fitness goals. So, and they can't use certain features or they need to understand content in a very different way, right? So they might not understand very complex charts and graphs, right? So I think tech savviness plays a very critical role here and should have been one of the points. For the second part, which is fitness and medical persona, this persona is more specialized in detail. It's great that you've included fitness goals and medical conditions. You might want to consider adding details about their preferred methods of tracking progress or how they would like to receive detailed information. Now, this obviously is basically understanding their current behavior, and we would get into that after we define the personas. So we were going to do this anyway. But if somebody challenges you and asks this in an interview, then you probably want to say, I think I'll probably focus this after defining the personas, right? So they want to understand your thought process. One thing to think about is whether there are any common pain points or challenges these personas might face. So again, this would be current behaviors which we would look at. So as you can see over here, it's doing a pretty decent job and it looks like we're on the right path over here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to ask the question about gender and age, and let's see what it says. So I'm going to start the conversation again. Hey ChatGPT, thank you so much. I think the point on tech savviness made a lot of sense. Although I'm thinking about including gender and age as well, I'm not sure how relevant that is because I believe irrespective of the gender and age, all of them would have similar needs, but the features of the app would probably be dependent on the age and gender. For example, the tech savviness that you mentioned would be an influence depending on the age and gender that they have. But I'm not entirely sure that's something that I need to consider when defining the persona. I'm planning to leave it out, but let me know if you think that's wrong or you have a different opinion.
Considering gender and age can add valuable context to your personas, especially if you want to tailor features and content to different user groups. For instance, age might influence the user's familiarity with technology or their dietary needs, and gender could affect preferences for certain types of nutritional information or features. However, if you believe that the core needs are similar across age and gender, and you want to keep the personas focused on their health and fitness goals, it's fine to prioritize those aspects. Just keep in mind that if you notice specific trends or feedback from real users later, you can always adjust your personas to reflect those insights. Does this help clarify your approach?
Now, what ChatGPT did here was something very interesting, right? So let's read this, right? Considering gender and age can add valuable context to your personas, especially if you want to tailor features to different user groups. For instance, age might influence familiarity with technology, which is basically tech savviness, and gender could affect preferences for certain nutritional value or features, right? Again, this is pretty obvious. However, if you believe that the core needs are similar across age, gender, and you want to keep the personas focused on their health and fitness goals, it's fine to prioritize those. Just keep in mind that if you notice specific trends or feedback from real users, you can always adjust those personas. Now, what is important here to understand is if an interviewer asked you this, saying, hey, do you think you should consider gender and age? If you are challenged on that, then you need to have an answer to that. And ChatGPT has given the answer to you, right? So if you are never considering age and gender in any problem statement that you're probably solving, and if somebody asks you why haven't you considered age, you sort of have an answer to this, right? And this makes so much sense, right? You have a reason why you're not doing it. And saying that if we notice specific trends or feedback, then we might want to consider it as a persona, right? This is how you sort of answer to complex questions in a whiteboarding interview, right? Now, essentially, as a beginner, you don't even know what sort of answer to give. But now you're getting these answers to these questions and you're understanding how to frame an answer to these potential questions that might come up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and clean up the personas by just adding the concept or basically the factor of tech savviness. And then I will go ahead and create some user stories for the first persona. And here is where things become really interesting because this is where we actually start understanding the pain points, the current behaviors, and start really focusing on problem solving. All right. So what I've done here is I've created personas, user stories for persona 1 and persona 2. But I also did something that I think was more important is to define what are basically nutrition components. Now, I don't know what is the exact term to put this in. I know that you call things like micronutrients and macronutrients, but I don't know what these are called. But basically, I just put them as, or maybe I should call this as food components if that's like a better terminology. So you've got macronutrients, which is basically protein, carbohydrates, and fats. And then you've got micronutrients like vitamins and minerals, like, calcium and zinc and magnesium and things like that. And then you have the ingredients of food products, of course. If you're taking, for example, a single item like, I don't know, a vegetable like potato, then it has, different micro and macronutrients. It doesn't really have ingredients, but if you're taking a food item which, has a bunch of ingredients, like for example, a biscuit or oatmeal or a sandwich, then you would have ingredients and also additives and preservatives as well. And I'm going to ask ChatGPT if there is something else I should consider. And I think if you are in a whiteboarding round, or you're trying to solve this problem with your product manager, and if you don't know what else is there, this is fine. This is basically subject matter knowledge. Just because you don't know this doesn't really make you a bad designer. So I'm going to ask this question to ChatGPT. So quickly, let's see how that goes. So I'm going to start the chat again. Hey ChatGPT. So I was actually thinking of creating the personas, but before that I wanted to take a step back and also sort of define the food component so that everybody is on the same page. So in food components, I was able to find 4 items, which is one, macronutrients like proteins, carbs, and fats. The second one is micronutrients such as vitamins and minerals. The third would be ingredients of a particular food product. And the fourth one is any additives or preservatives. Do you think that I should consider any other components, or is this fine?
You've covered the key components quite well. Macronutrients, micronutrients, ingredients, and additives are fundamental for understanding nutritional information. If you want to be thorough, you might also consider serving size. Clearly defining how much of the food product constitutes a serving can impact dietary decisions. Caloric information. While it might overlap with macronutrients, it's often a key metric users look for. Allergen information, important for users with allergies or sensitivities. These additional components could provide a more comprehensive view, but it depends on your app's focus and the user needs you're addressing. Does this align with what you're aiming for?
Right. So as you can see, it suggested serving size. Now this is not really a food component, and we would sort of obviously integrate serving size later on. Calorie information is pretty interesting, which is something that I didn't really think about. And I think calories is also an interesting metric, or basically a data point that people would obviously be interested in. So it would be nice to add that. And allergen information, people with important for users with allergy sensitivities. I think we would somehow cover all of that under ingredients or additives or preservatives, right? So I think it's fine. I think calorie information is something that we should add. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that as the 5th item, which is calories. All right. Now let's look at user stories for persona 1. So just to quickly recap, user persona is one who just generally wants to stay healthy, basic knowledge of nutrition, no medical conditions, no strict diet plan, right? And I've also added that they may or may not be tech savvy for both, right? So there is a possibility that both these users could be or could not be tech savvy. So I'm just going to add that over here, right? All right, now user stories for persona 1. They want to know general nutritional information of a food item and in what quantities to consume. And for example, this could be a food item they found in a grocery store, could be just fruits and vegetables, things like nuts also. And then you have your cooked food, right? So it could be like an omelette, a rice item, whatever it is, right? So whether you eat outside or inside cooked food, you want to know information about that. And then a food item found in a grocery store, you typically have the nutrition on the back of the packet, right? So they just want to know basic nutritional information and in what quantities to consume. And they would know if it is generally good for health or not, because they just want high level information, right? They don't want to know more. They just want to know how healthy or not it is, right? And the second one is basically they want recommendation for specific types of healthy food. For example, they could be like, I want to know which type of food product is high in protein, what is low in sugar, just high level recommendations, right? So they're not looking for too much information. They just want an overall view, the general information, what quantities to consume. And maybe I can add another one over here, which is basically or maybe I'll frame it this way. So wants to know if a food, how healthy, or maybe let's frame it that way, how healthy a food item is, right? So basically that's user persona 1. Now I'm not going to look into persona 2 because I don't want to distract you guys, and maybe let me I'll probably reduce the opacity. Oh, looks like I can't reduce opacity. So I'm just going to move this over to the side and let's do this. Now, One of the things that I've not yet done is go into features and solutions, because the next step would ideally be to define the current behaviors and then move on to the pain points of the current behaviors and then identify solutions based on the pain points, right? So for now, we're just doing this, and there is a good chance that ChatGPT might question us about this, but let's see how this goes. So I'm going to open up ChatGPT again, and we are going to run the prompt, or basically ask the question. Hey ChatGPT. So I've gone ahead and created a few user stories for the first persona, basically somebody who generally wants to stay healthy. We discussed about the core characteristics of the first persona. So I have come up with 3 user stories. Do challenge me on my design decisions over here and ask me any questions to validate my thinking over here. So the first one is basically a user wants to know general nutritional information of a food item and basically what quantities to consume it in. And these could be food items that they found in a grocery store. It could be fruits or vegetables, or it could be cooked food, something they ate in a restaurant outside or something they cooked at home. The second user story is user story is that they want to know how healthy a food item is, whether it's less healthy, more healthy, what range does it fall under. And the third one is they want recommendation for specific types of healthy food. So they want foods like high in protein or high in carbohydrates or low in sugar. What do you think about this? And feel free to ask me any questions to understand my thinking here.
Your user stories are a great start and align well with the needs of someone who wants to stay generally healthy. Here are a few thoughts and questions to help refine them. 1. General nutritional information. This story covers a broad range of food types, which is good. How do you plan to handle the variety of data sources for different food types? For example, will you have a database for grocery items, a way to input restaurant dishes, and a method for home-cooked meals? 2. Healthiness assessment. This story is focused on evaluating how healthy a food item is. How will you determine the criteria for this assessment? Will it be based on nutrient density, calorie content, or something else? Also, how will you present this information to make it easy for users to understand? 3. Recommendations. Providing recommendations based on specific nutritional needs is valuable. How will you gather and update the recommendations? Will you use user preferences, dietary trends, or nutritional databases? These questions might help clarify your approach and ensure that the features align well with user needs. How are you planning to address these aspects?
Amazing. Thank you for that. I will get back to you with the answers to this. But another quick question I have is, do you think that there are any more user stories that I should include for Persona 1? And just to remind you, Persona 1 is somebody who just wants high-level information and generally just wants to stay healthy.
For Persona 1, you've covered some essential user stories, but here are a few more you might consider. Tracking progress. A user might want to track their overall dietary habits or progress toward general health goals, like increasing fruit and vegetable intake. Finding healthy alternatives. If they encounter a food item that's less healthy, they might want suggestions for healthier alternatives. They could be interested in tips or articles about healthy eating habits or understanding nutrition better. These additional stories could enhance the app's usefulness for someone looking to maintain a general healthy lifestyle. Does this fit with what you're thinking for Persona 1?
All right. So we got some information, and let's sort of study that a little bit, right? So it says, and the first question that I basically asked is questions surrounding it, right? So surrounding my user personas here. So the first one is, the story covers a broad range of food types, which is good. How do you plan to handle the variety of data sources for different food types? And this is actually a good question that somebody might ask. However, it's not probably the best time to ask this question. When you're focusing on solutions, that's when somebody would sort of ask this question. I don't feel like this question is appropriate to be asked at this time because we're just figuring out the user stories, but this is a question that somebody may ask you, right? And it's actually good to have the answers to this, because when you're coming up with solutions, you can revisit this and you can go ahead and answer these questions, right? And this is how you will come up with a good solution, right? So just coming back over here, how do you plan to handle the variety of data sources? For example, will you have a database for grocery items, a way to input restaurant dishes, and a method for home cooked meals. So it's basically sort of asking how would I solve the problem. Healthiness assessment is the story is focused on evaluating how healthy a food item is. How will you determine the criteria for assessment? Will it be based on nutrient density, calorie count, or something else? And how will you represent this information? Now, this is very specific to nutrition and food, right? How will you identify what is healthy, right? And essentially, this is a question that you need to ask the product manager if you're working in that company, right? Now, if you're in a whiteboarding round, you can definitely come up with ideas and suggestions. But if you're working in a company as a product designer and working with a product manager, you need to ask the product manager, hey, how are you defining what is healthy and what is not healthy, right? And something that's healthy for one person may not be healthy for another person, right? And we probably might have to go into the depth of it, right? But here, ChatGPT is telling you to think about that already, right? Is it based on nutrient density? Is something healthy because it has more nutrients? Is something healthy because it has more calories or anything else, right? And essentially, somebody can even ask you this question in a whiteboarding round, right? So, hey, how are you going to define what is healthy, right? And this is something that you need to know the answer for, all right? And the last one is recommendations. Providing recommendations is valuable. How will you gather and update recommendations? Will you use user preferences, dietary trends, or nutritional database, right? Again, excellent question, and we can probably look into this later when we think of solutions and how we do it. Of course, this is more of a product question, but at the end of the day, you still need to have some sort of answer to this question. All right. Now, I also went ahead and said, can you suggest me more user stories? And it suggested tracking progress. This, I believe, is not important for Persona 1, probably for Persona 2. Finding healthy alternatives, which I feel is sort of coming under recommendations itself. And then educational content. Educational content is pretty interesting because if somebody wants to gain knowledge, then this is good. We sort of never defined it in Persona 1. But for now, maybe we could just ignore the fact of educational content, right? Now, I'm not going to go ahead and answer these questions. I will come back to these questions later when we are sort of defining the solutions. But for now, I want to just focus on user persona 2, get the user stories so that we can then move into other things. All right, so here are user stories for Persona 2. Now, I've put the first 3 user stories of Persona 1 for Persona 2 because I feel like Persona 2 also probably wants to do the same things, and they also want to do additional things. Persona 1 seems to be some sort of a subset of Persona 2, right? But the additional things that I found for Persona 2 is basically somebody who wants to track the calorie intake, protein, and fat consumption because they have specific goals and probably they have specific diet plans. So they want to track this on a daily basis or a weekly basis. They also want suggestions on what food items to eat based on the consumption goals, right? Now it is a little bit similar to this. This is more like very generic saying high in protein, low in low in sugar. But this is basically more suggestions in what quantities to eat and what types of food to eat, right? So we could take a couple of examples, right? So for example, we could have a protein-rich diet. It could be like what to consume for the rest 20% daily fat goal. So basically what this means is, after having lunch, you log in everything, and during breakfast, you log in everything. And for the rest of the day, you have to consume 20% fats. So what is something that you can consume 20% fat along with a little bit protein, for example, right? So let's say along with a little protein, right? So something that's, very specific. So now let's run this with ChatGPT and see what we get, right? So let's go. Hey, so I made a couple of user stories for Persona 2, and I totally have 5 user stories. The first 3 user stories are very similar, or basically the exact user stories that we had for user Persona 1, because I believe user Persona 2 will also have the same requirements as user Persona 1. But in addition to those, I have 2 new user stories for user Persona 2. The first one is they also want to track calorie intake, protein, and fat consumption for the day. They have some sort of a goal, and so they want to make sure that they're consuming it in certain quantities. They also probably want suggestions on what food to eat based on the consumption goals. So, for example, they want to understand what is a protein rich diet that they can consume in a particular day or a week. And they also maybe want to understand what to consume for the rest 20% of their daily fats goal, along with a little protein. For example, what I'm trying to say here is if you had your breakfast and lunch and you have inputted your information about what food you ate, and then you have to fill up the rest of your calorie count or fats consumption or protein consumption for the day, what food items would the app suggest to finish off that balance amount that's there, right? So this is what I'm thinking, and feel free to challenge me on this.
Your additional user stories for Persona 2 are very relevant and practical, given their focus on specific fitness goals and medical conditions. Here's some feedback and questions to help refine these stories. 1. Tracking nutrients. Tracking calorie intake, protein, and fat is crucial for someone with specific goals. How will the app handle input and tracking? Will it offer manual entry, integration with other fitness trackers, or both? 2. Consumption goals and suggestions. The idea of suggesting food to meet remaining goals is excellent. It adds a dynamic element to the app. How will the app determine these suggestions? Will it use a database of foods and their nutritional values, or will it leverage algorithms to balance the remaining goals? 3. User experience. Consider how users will interact with this feature. For example, will they input their current intake manually, or will they scan barcodes? How will suggestions be presented, e.g., as a list of foods, meal ideas, or recipes? These additional stories enhance the app's functionality for users with more specific dietary needs. How do you plan to address these aspects in the design?
Thanks for your suggestions, but I think you're focusing a little bit on the solutions. And can we just take a few steps back and just focus on the user stories here? Do you have any questions regarding why I chose these particular user stories, or do you want any clarity on them?
Got it. Focusing on the user stories themselves, here are a few questions to help clarify your thinking. 1. Tracking nutrients. Why did you choose to focus on tracking calorie intake, protein, and fat specifically? Are there other nutrients or aspects of diet that might also be important for Persona 2? 2. Suggestions for food. How do you envision the app handling suggestions for food to meet specific nutritional goals? Are there particular types of recommendations you think would be most valuable for this persona? 3. Existing user stories. How do the additional
All right, so the connection just quickly failed over here, but doesn't matter. We have the information in the text-based format. But one thing that you need to notice here is, as you see, it actually gave me questions about the solutions, but I told it to change it and ask me about user stories specifically. So let's go ahead and read everything that it mentioned. I'm gonna go back. All right. So if you see over here, all these things about how to track nutrients, how to input, what should be the user experience is very solution focused, right? But what I want is the user stories itself. It's basically asking me, why did you choose to focus on calorie intake, protein, and fat specifically? Are there other nutrients and aspects that might be important for Persona 2? Now, here's the thing. When you present these user stories in an interview, there is a good chance that the interviewer might ask you this very exact question. Why did you choose to focus on this and not? So I'm going to go ahead and write the answer and then share it with ChatGPT and see what it says, right? Then suggestions for food. How do you envision the app handling suggestions for food to meet specific nutrition goals? Are there particular types of recommendations you would think would be most valuable for this persona? I'm not entirely sure what this means. I don't think it did a good job at explaining that. And then existing user stories. How do the additional user stories for Persona 2 build on or differ from the ones for Persona 1? Are there specific needs that you're aiming to address with this new issue stories, right? So we already know the answer to this. So it's basically asking, why do you have additional stories and how are they different? And we already obviously looked at that, right? The user goals here is, they have high knowledge, they have specific goals, and they have a strict diet plan. So this is why we need those additional stories. So this question didn't really make sense. But the first question, which is pretty interesting, why did you choose to focus on this, and are there other nutrients that might be important for Persona 2, right? So I'm going to write that down, And then I'm going to go ahead and run that with ChatGPT, and let's see what it says. All right. So what I've written here is my answer, right? So basically the question is, why do you choose to focus on calorie intake, protein, and fat specifically? Are there other nutrients or aspects of a diet, right? So here I'm saying that they are the most common data points that are tracked in a strict diet. You sort of track calorie intake, protein, fats, and carbohydrates, and you don't usually track other things. And you could also say that this is basically from research that I did. This is basically from all my friends that I asked, and this is basically knowledge that I got, right? And you could also add on by saying that small percent of users might be looking for certain vitamins, minerals, for example, right? Just a small percentage of people. And you want to run this with ChatGPT, and basically this is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start the conversation. Hey ChatGPT, so I have an answer to one of your questions, which is basically why did I choose to focus on calorie intake, carbohydrates, protein, and fat? So I have two reasons. The first one is they are probably the most common data points that are tracked in a strict diet. I think this is what most people are looking for. And the second one is that, of course, there might be a small percentage of people who are looking for small information such as vitamins or minerals, additives, preservatives, right? But I think generally this is what you go ahead to identify what is a healthy food item or not. Do you think I'm wrong? And if you think I'm wrong, can you please correct it?
Your reasoning is solid. Calorie intake, carbohydrates, protein, and fat are indeed the most common and relevant metrics for many people tracking a strict diet. These data points provide a clear picture of dietary intake and help users manage their nutritional goals effectively. Focusing on these metrics makes sense for the majority of users, especially those with specific fitness or health goals. While vitamins, minerals, and other components are important, they often play a secondary role in day-to-day tracking for many people. Your approach aligns well with common dietary tracking practices. As long as you're aware that some users might still seek detailed nutritional information, your focus on the primary metrics is a practical choice. Does this help clarify your approach?
All right, so it looks like we're sort of on the right track. And basically, it's saying that the main things like calorie intake, carbohydrates are data points, give a clear picture. Focusing on this makes sense for majority of users, especially with those sort of repeating what we're saying. While vitamins, minerals, and other components are important, they often play a secondary role in day-to-day tracking for people. Fine, right? So it looks like we're fine. And of course, this might be something simple and it's pretty an obvious question. But obviously, this is a question that somebody may ask you in an interview, and you need to have an answer for it, right? Now, a very cool, interesting thing is that if you look at the design process, so we defined the high-level goals, user personas, user stories, and now we need to get on to the solutions. But there's this one part that I'm missing, which is essentially understanding the customer's pain points, right? Now, I know pain points is usually under user stories, right? So users want to do this, and so this is really a pain point for them. But if they have a current method that works for them, it is not necessarily a pain point, and it then becomes more of a requirement, right? If you understand what I'm saying, right? So it's a little blurry over here, because essentially you could do pain points first, and then based on pain point, you could do user stories, which is fine. But in this case, we're changing the approach a little bit, right? So what I'm trying to say is there is one step, which is basically understanding the current behavior and then seeing if there are pain points in the current behavior. And then we can define the key features and solutions for the user stories. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just ask ChatGPT that now that we have done all these three, what should be the next step? Let's see what it says. Hey, so now that we have sort of defined the high-level goals, user personas, and user stories, what do you think should be the next step that we should follow?
The next step is to identify the key features or solutions that will address the user stories you've defined. This involves translating those stories into specific functionalities that your app needs to have, right? For example, if one of the user stories involves tracking calorie intake, you might need features for logging food items, calculating nutritional values, and displaying daily intake summaries. After identifying these features, you'll create user flows to map out how users will interact with the app to accomplish their goals. Then you can start thinking about the screen layouts and design. Does that align with your plan, or is there a specific area you want to dive into next?
I was thinking of going into understanding the user pain points and the current behaviors that they follow to, sort of follow or achieve the user stories that we decided. I think that's important to do before solutions. I think I may be wrong, but let me know what you think.
You're absolutely right. Understanding user pain points and current behaviors is crucial before jumping into solutions. This insight will help you design features that genuinely address the user's needs and challenges. Identifying pain points can reveal gaps in current solutions and highlight opportunities for improvement. For instance, you might discover that users struggle with accurately tracking food intake or finding reliable nutritional information. Exploring current behaviors helps ensure that your app fits seamlessly into users' existing routines and preferences. Once you have a clear understanding of these aspects, you'll be better positioned to design features that are both effective and user friendly. Does this approach fit with what you had in mind?
All right. So as you can clearly see, it went ahead and didn't do a good job. It sort of obviously failed over here. It said we should go into key features and solutions just because we had sort of defined that, right? It didn't really tell us that we need to focus on understanding key behaviors, right? And I guess that's okay, right? But as long as you as a designer know the process that you should follow, then that should be fine, right? So if you quickly read what it said, I think it's pretty much saying that, what are the benefits of identifying pain points, right? So now what we're going to do is going to go ahead and sort of define the current behaviors, and probably I need to update this as well. So here in the design process, we have defining metrics, which it did not suggest. But what I would do is I'd probably go ahead and take define metrics and put it after this, because I feel I still need a little bit more information. And here we can do current behaviors and pain points, right? This is a good thing to keep in mind. So let's go ahead and do this. All right. So I've gone ahead and written down the current behaviors and pain points, and I've taken a quite simple approach. So all I've done is taken the user stories that we have for Persona 2, which sort of encompasses Persona 1 as well, and then sort of understood and how the current behaviors are for each of these various user stories that we have, right? And also the respective pain points. So let's go into it in detail. So the first one is basically they want to know general information, general nutritional information of a food item and in what quantities to consume. That's what people want to do, and what are the current behaviors and pain points for it, right? So they read the back. This is a spelling mistake. They read the back of a nutrition label, which is very annoying as it sort of takes time to understand. Turning over a food product every time is time consuming. The print is also very small, which makes it quite harder to read, right? So this is if there is a nutrition label. And if, of course, there's no nutrition label, then you have to Google the information, which is, extra effort and, like time consuming. Another reason is nutrition label usually gives values per 100 grams, and this requires extra calculation of nutrition per serving. Of course, you might not consume the entire 100 grams. So if you were probably having 20 grams in a day, how much nutrition would that have, right? So all that is extra mental calculation. Now, if I think about this, I feel like we sort of covered food item at a grocery store and fruits and vegetables. We can also probably look at cooked food. I would probably say that there is no way to figure out the overall nutrition in a cooked food. So let's say no effective solution to understand nutrition consumption or composition of a cooked, or let's say I just say a meal, right? Maybe that's a better word, right? So this is what I believe. If somebody wants to know how healthy a food item is, you probably have to Google that information, because you have to say, hey, if I have this problem, is this food good? If I have that problem, is this food good? And it's usually, you have to do the searching. If somebody wants recommendations for certain types of healthy food, again, this would all come down to Googling the information or watching YouTube videos. I think that's the only way to do it, which is not really, sometimes maybe effective, sometimes it's not. They want to track calorie intake, protein, and fat consumption. So I think they probably use calorie tracking apps, notes, This is quite straightforward. And they also want suggestion on what food to eat based on consumption goals, right? So what that basically means is if you want like a protein rich diet, or you want to understand what rest you have to consume to meet your daily goals, then you probably would use a couple of fitness apps that have this information, or you probably Google information, right? So I think at a very high level, these are probably current behaviors. Now, what we're going to do with ChatGPT is a little bit of a different approach. What we will do is we will not ask ChatGPT the answers to this. We're only going to ask it a question and say, can you tell us what could be the current behaviors and pain points based on the user stories that we made? Let's see what it gives, and then we will figure out our next plan of action depending on what ChatGPT says. So here are in ChatGPT, and I'm going to go ahead and start a new conversation here. Hey ChatGPT, so I want to move on to the current behaviors and pain points section. Now, considering the various user stories and personas that we created, would you be able to give me a list of pain points and current behaviors these two personas follow in order to meet their goals?
Sure. Here are some common pain points and current behaviors for the personas based on their user stories. For Persona 1, general health goals. 1. Pain points. Difficulty finding accurate information. Struggling to find reliable and clear nutritional information for various food items. Feeling overwhelmed by too much information or complex data that's hard to interpret quickly. Inconsistent tracking. Challenges in keeping track of daily food intake and understanding how it impacts overall health. 2. Current behaviors. Manual research. Relying on food labels, online searches, or nutrition apps to get nutritional information. Using generic apps, using general health or fitness apps that may not offer detailed or relevant nutritional insights. Occasional tracking. Tracking food intake sporadically rather than consistently. For Persona 2, specific fitness goals or medical conditions. 1. Pain points. Complex tracking needs. Difficulty in accurately tracking specific nutrients like protein, fat, and calories, especially with varied food sources. Limited personalized suggestions. Struggling to find personalized meal suggestions that fit their specific dietary goals and restrictions. Integration issues. Issues with integrating data from multiple sources, such as different food logging apps or fitness trackers. 2. Current behaviors. Detailed logging. Keeping detailed logs of food intake, either manually or using specialized apps to monitor nutrient consumption. Using multiple tools. Utilizing several tools or apps to manage different aspects of their diet and fitness goals. Consulting professionals. Seeking advice from nutritionists or fitness experts for tailored recommendations and adjustments to their diet. Understanding these pain points and behaviors will help guide the design of features that address these issues effectively. Does this help with what you're looking to do?
All right, so that was a lot of information, so let's sort of break it down. So for Persona 1, they have difficulty finding accurate information, struggling to find reliable and nutritional information, right? So I think this comes down to Googling information, which is extra effort, right? Feeling overwhelmed by too much information and complex data that's hard to interpret. And this is basically, the nutrition information gives you value per 100 grams. There could be a lot of things to sort of consider in this point, right? And then inconsistent tracking. Now, we're not really considering tracking for Persona 1, we're only looking at tracking for Persona 2, but still it's important to look at. Challenges in keeping track of daily food intake, understanding how it impacts overall health, right? Quite vague, but I think people who are serious about this are sort of tracking up, so I don't think it's really an important point. We have current behaviors as well, so relying on food labels, online searches, nutrition apps, we sort of covered all of that. Using generic apps, also we covered that, and tracking food intake sporadically rather than consistently, right? So this is a bit of a behavior problem. Of course, it's valid, does make sense, but this is a small problem that we have to solve, right? And this could be done with emails or reminders or a gamification system. That's fine, right? But it's a small problem to solve. We're not assuming that these people are not serious about it. Of course, these people are probably serious about it. Then for Persona 2, we have complex tracking needs, difficulty in tracking specific nutrients like protein, fats, and calories, especially with varied food sources. Again, quite similar to the occasional tracking problem that we have, but that's fine. limited personalized suggestions. This would always come down to what suggestions to have. So they probably use, logging apps. So here they use various tools or apps to do it. Integration issues, integrating with various multiple sources such as different food logging apps or fitness trackers. This is much of a technical thing. I think a lot of apps sort of solve this problem today already. So I guess it's fine, right? So if we look at this, we've sort of covered most of the pain points in behavior. So now, ideally, what we want to do now is move on to the next step, which is where we think about interesting solutions. And this is where ChatGPT can sort of really help us, right? So what we would probably want to do is we have this design process over here and we finalize the current behaviors and pain points, and now we have to go into key features and solutions and metrics and user flows, right? And I think we could probably do the solutions and user flows together. We'll see what is the best way to do it. We'll start with identifying key features and solutions, and then accordingly we could define the metrics. All right, so I've gone ahead and written down the solutions and features. And basically what I've done is I've just looked at the current behaviors and pain points and then tried to identify an appropriate solution for it. And I've gone ahead and created it for all 5 of them. And the 5th one is quite similar to the 3rd one. So I'm going to talk about that in a bit. But what I will do is I will tell you what all of my solutions are, and then we will do it with ChatGPT one at a time so that ChatGPT has enough time to give information about one specific solution and not bombard it, and we don't have to bombard it with a lot of things, right? So the first one is basically wants to know the general nutritional information of a food item and what quantities to consume it in. And essentially, if we were to look at it, it's something that people usually find in a grocery store. It could be fruits or vegetables or cooked food, like a meal that you made, right? So they want to know the nutrition information and in what quantities to consume it, right? And how do people do it? They usually read the back of a nutrition label, which is very annoying, which takes time to understand. You Google it, and nutrition label gives you, values of 100 grams. And this requires extra calculation of nutrition per serving because your serving could be more than 100 grams or less than 100 grams. And there's no effective solution to understand the nutrition composition of a meal. So if you made something like, a rice item, or you had, some sort of roti with a curry or something like that, then it's very hard to identify what is the nutrition composition of it, right? So we want that to be done over here. And my solutions is basically you search from a database that's there in the app. And the assumption here is that you can search pretty much anything in the app, and you can sort of customize it as well. You can scan a product that buy in the supermarket, and you can see what it has. You can actually do this by scanning the barcode. And another important thing would be the appropriate unit of measurement for serving. So, for example, if you're having a banana, then you don't really know what is it in grams. So you probably say a small banana, medium, or a large banana, right? And if you are sort of measuring oil, then you say number of teaspoons or tablespoons. If you're saying oats, then probably small, medium, or large cup of oats, right? Nuts, you can probably say units or pieces, for example, and grams will always be available. You always obviously have the option to choose grams specifically. But if you think you don't know what the grams is and you still want to measure it, I think this unit of measurement should work. And we would also have ranges, right, of for other units of measurement. So it would be like if it's a small banana, then maybe it's like 15 to 20 grams, right? You have those ranges as well, because if you know sort of a range, but you don't know the exact range, then you can probably pick a small, medium, or large because you've been giving the range, right? So this is what I came up with, and let's ask ChatGPT if it thinks it's right. Hey, so I went ahead and wrote down a couple of solutions for both the personas, and I'm focusing on one pain point or one user story for now. So the user story is, again, for both of those personas that we have made it for, is they usually want to know the general nutritional information of a food item and in what quantities they should consume it. I've come up with 3 features or use cases for this. So you can search for a particular meal or a particular food item like a vegetable or a bread or egg from the huge database. And we are making the assumption here that you can pretty much search for anything you want. You can also scan a product, which is point number 2. You can scan a product and you take a picture or you scan the barcode, and then you sort of know the nutritional content of it. It's very well displayed for you. Another important thing that I thought of writing down is defining appropriate units of measurement for serving, because usually most of the apps use the format of grams, and you usually may not know what it is. If you're a beginner or you don't understand what is 50 grams versus 200 grams, it becomes hard, right? So I came up with a couple of examples. So for example, if I'm having a banana, then instead of choosing grams, you choose a small banana, medium and large, and each of these would have a specific set of ranges of grams for this, right? So it becomes a little bit easier for the app to calculate and also for you to pick. Oil could be another one where you can, measure the number of teaspoons or tablespoons. If you're having oats, then you can probably say small cup, medium cup, or a large cup. And if you have nuts, you can sort of choose pieces or units. Grams will always be available to the user if they really want to input specific amount of grams, or they want to select in grams. That's that. So what do you think about this? Let me know if I'm on the wrong track and you think I should change something over here.
These solutions sound very practical and user-friendly. Here's some feedback to help refine them. 1. Search functionality. Strengths. Allowing users to search from a comprehensive database makes it easy to find nutritional information quickly. Considerations. Ensure that the search function is intuitive and supports various food types and common misspellings. You might also consider adding a predictive search feature that suggests food items as the user types. 2. Scanning products. Strengths. Scanning barcodes or taking pictures to get nutritional information is very convenient, especially for packaged foods. Considerations. Think about how the app will handle less common items or those without barcodes. You might also want to ensure the app can accurately interpret scanned data from pictures. 3. Units of measurement. Strengths. Providing common, easy-to-understand units like small, medium, large banana, teaspoons of oil, or cups of oats makes tracking more accessible, especially for beginners. Considerations. Ensure that users can easily switch between these common measurements and grams if they prefer more precise tracking. Additionally, consider how the app will handle foods that don't fit neatly into these categories. Overall, these features address key pain points effectively by simplifying the process of finding and understanding nutritional information. Does this feedback align with your approach, or is there anything else you'd like to explore?
Yeah, this sounds good. Would you mind asking me a couple of questions to sort of validate or judge my thinking over here?
Absolutely. Here are some questions to help validate and challenge your thinking. 1. Database accuracy. How do you plan to ensure that the nutritional information in your database is accurate and up to date? What sources will you rely on, and how will you handle discrepancies between sources? 2. User experience with scanning. What steps will you take to ensure the scanning feature works seamlessly? How will you handle instances where the barcode or image scan doesn't yield results? Will you offer manual input as a fallback? 3. Custom measurements. How will you decide the standard units for different foods, e.g. small, medium, large for bananas? Will you gather user input or rely on standard serving sizes? How will you handle user feedback if they find the units confusing or inaccurate? 4. Data integration. If users scan or search for foods, how will the app integrate this data into their daily logs or goals? How will you ensure the information is presented in a way that's easy to understand and use? 5. User flexibility. While providing common units like teaspoons or cups, how will you accommodate users who have different preferences or needs? For example, some users might prefer metric units, while others might want more specific measurements. How will you balance flexibility with simplicity? Answering these questions can help ensure your features are robust and user-centric. What are your thoughts on these considerations?
Okay, so you can see we got a lot of information. The first part was basically sort of validating, and the second part, I asked it to challenge me on a couple of things. And so let's dive into this a lot deeper. Search functionality. Strengths: allowing users to search from a comprehensive database. This is fine. Consideration: ensure that the search function is intuitive and supports various food types and common spellings. This is pretty much very, screen related. So we're not going to dive into this much. When we're designing the search experience, we can figure out how we would do each of that, right? In fact, to be honest, you can even, make a complete section for search. Think about how the search experience would work, and then you can ask that with ChatGPT, right? Scanning products. I think one of the most important thing that I said is how will the app handle less common items or those without barcodes? You might want to ensure the app can accurately interpret scanned data from pictures, right? So this is definitely a question that you might get in an interview or you might be challenged against by your product manager. So basically, how are you planning to scan items without barcodes? Is manually inputting them going to be a thing, right? Third is units of measurement. Ensure that you can easily switch between common measurements and grams if they prefer precise tracking. This is again a very UI thing, so we don't have to focus about it right now. Now, questions that it challenged me with. How do you ensure nutritional information in your database is accurate and up to date? What sources will you rely on? And how will you handle discrepancies? Now, essentially, this is not your job to do as a product designer. There would be a product team and there would be somebody who is in charge of updating all of this information, right? And there will be a team. There might be some sources. Well, you don't know, right? This is not technically our job. User experience with scanning. What steps will you take to ensure that the scanning feature works seamlessly? How will you handle instances where the barcode or item scan doesn't yield results? How will you offer manual input as a fallback, right? So the scanning experience is a good question. Although you might want screens to explain things over here, at a high level, you should be able to answer any questions that comes your way. Then we have custom measurements. How will you decide the standard units for different foods, small, medium, large for bananas? Will you gather user input or rely on standard serving sizes? How will you handle user feedback if they find the units confusing or inaccurate? This is again a very excellent question, very specific to design. The entire interaction here will make or break your design over here. If user searches for food, how will the app integrate this data into their daily logs or goals? How will you ensure the information is presented in a way that's easy to understand? Yeah, so this is a very high level question. There are multiple ways to present something, and we need to go into deeper context to define how something is going to be presented. While providing common units like teaspoons or cups, how will you accommodate users who have different preferences or need? For example, some might prefer metric units while others might want specific measurements. How will you balance flexibility and simplicity, right? Again, we are talking about the ability to give them a measure of a unit of measurement that they find easy and is basically UX. So now let's go to the next one, which is they want to know how healthy a food item is. So essentially what you would do is you would consider a person's allergies, dietary requirements, and fitness goals and tell them how healthy a food item is. So for example, a donut may be acceptable for everyone, but someone who's really trying to cut down weight drastically, even one donut is sort of not acceptable, right? So depending on the food item and your dietary requirements, you would see some sort of a indication of how healthy it is. There would be a range of low healthy or very high healthy or whatever it is. And then you can also calculate the nutrition content and healthiness of a meal. So if you're trying to cook something or you cooked a particular meal, then you could see that over here. But probably you would be able to see that over here as well, right? So you search from the database in the app by entering a particular meal and it would give you everything, and also it would tell you how healthy a food item is, right? So I think essentially these both can be combined. This is not just giving you the nutrition information, it is also telling you how healthy it is, right? I'm not going to run this with ChatGPT because it's pretty straightforward, but we can do all of these and then maybe run a single prompt later. Okay, wants recommendations for specific types of healthy food, right? So you have the ability to compare certain food items to see which one has more of a particular nutrient, or which one is more healthy or less healthy, and in what servings to consider it in. Even smart suggestions, right? Now, here is where a lot of interesting things could happen, and somebody could ask you what sort of suggestions would you give to people, right? And we're going to talk about this in a bit. You can also track the calorie intake, protein, and fat consumption. So this is obviously tracking. This is not just seeing, you track it to meet your goals. So you select a food item or a meal and then you enter the quantity, and then it'll automatically fill in all the calories, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Or you can manually log for each ingredient if you want, if you don't think there's a food item or a meal that you made. So obviously, right, you probably had oatmeal with banana, but you had it in different quantities. So you added more bananas and you add less oatmeal, and you added a few nuts, chia seeds, and things like that. So you probably want to manually log each ingredient, right? So this is one way to do it. The last one is want suggestions on what food to eat based on consumption goals. I think this is pretty much very similar to the third one and sort of overlaps all the three of them, right? So what I'm going to basically do now is I'm going to run these three with ChatGPT in one prompt, and then we'll see what it says. Hey, thank you for that. So for the other user stories and basically solutions, here is what I have. Let me know what you think and do challenge me on my design thinking here, right? So if a user generally wants to know how healthy a food item is, you can consider the user's allergies, dietary requirements, and fitness goals in order to determine how healthy a food item is. For example, if somebody has a donut, usually it's acceptable for everyone. But if someone is really trying to cut down weight drastically, then it may not be a good idea. Maybe one donut per week is something that's acceptable, right? So the app would tell you how healthy it is and probably what quantities to consume it in, right? You can also calculate the nutrition content and healthiness of a meal over here. So I think this is pretty straightforward. The second one is basically the user wants recommendations on specific types of healthy food. So the user can compare different types of foods and see which one is more healthy, which one is less healthy, which one has more certain set of nutrients, and which one has less. We can also consider some sort of smart suggestions to the user. And the last one is basically the user can track calorie intake, protein, and fat consumption. So essentially, they can log in a food item, enter the quantity, and the app will sort of calculate everything for them. Or if there's a complex case, for example, you had an oatmeal with banana and you had two bananas with oatmeal and some nuts and you had oat milk and things like that, then the app may not know the exact composition. So you can manually log each of those ingredients and the app will go ahead and split everything and fill up the information for you, right? So this is what I have come up with. Do challenge me on my design thinking here.
These solutions address the user stories well, but here are some considerations and questions to refine your thinking further. 1. Determining healthiness of a food item. Personalization. How will the app gather and update user-specific information like allergies, dietary requirements, and fitness goals? Will it prompt users regularly to update their preferences? Balancing flexibility and accuracy. How will the app account for varying definitions of healthy across different users? For instance, a food item might be healthy for one user's goals, but not for another's. Will there be an option for users to set their health priorities, e.g., low carb, high protein? User guidance, when suggesting quantities like one donut per week, how will the app ensure these suggestions are evidence-based and personalized? Would you consider including expert insights or scientific data to support these recommendations? 2. Recommendations on specific types of healthy food. Comparison feature. How will the comparison of foods be presented? Will it be a side-by-side nutritional comparison, or will there be a scoring system? How will you ensure the comparisons are clear and meaningful? Smart suggestions. What algorithm or logic will drive the smart suggestions? Will it consider user preferences, past behaviors, and current goals? How will it evolve over time with more user data? User input and feedback. Will there be a mechanism for users to provide feedback on the recommendations? For instance, if a user consistently rejects certain suggestions, how will the app learn and adapt? 3. Tracking calorie intake, protein, and fat consumption. Ease of logging. For manual logging of complex meals, how will the app streamline the process to avoid user frustration? Will there be templates or saved meal options for frequently consumed items? Detailed nutritional breakdown. When breaking down complex meals, how will the app handle variations in ingredients and preparation methods? Will it allow for customization in case users have specific recipes or portion sizes? Real-time updates. How will the app update and display progress toward daily goals in real time? Will it include visual aids like graphs or progress bars to keep users engaged and informed? Additional considerations. User education. How will the app educate users about the healthiness of foods and nutritional content? Will there be an educational component or resources for users to learn more about nutrition? Engagement and motivation. What features will the app include to keep users motivated and engaged in tracking their nutrition over the long term? For instance, will there be gamification elements, challenges, or community support? These questions aim to ensure your solutions are robust, user-centric, and adaptable to individual needs. What do you think of these considerations?
Okay, so that was a lot of information. So let's quickly run through it, right? And to be very honest, if you observe here, there is so much somebody can challenge you or question you on, and you need to know how to think and give the answer to this, right? So let's go ahead. Personalization. How will the app gather and update user specific information like allergies, dietary requirements, and fitness goals, right? Will it prompt users regularly to update their preference, right? So somebody can ask you, how are you going to, personalize the experience and gather this information, right? And the answers, could depend, right? So probably you do it during onboarding. Maybe you do it inside the app. So you let the users inside the app, you let them explore, and then they end up adding allergies, right? So there are multiple ways to solve this problem. Balancing frequency and accuracy. How will the app account for various definitions of healthy across different users? For example, a food item may be healthy for one user goals, but are not others. Will there be an option for users to set their health priorities, right? Which is very similar to personalization if you ask me, all right? User guidance. When suggesting quantities like one donut per week, how will the app ensure these suggestions are evidence-based and personalized? Would you consider including expert insights or scientific data to support your recommendations, right? And essentially, it's sort of giving you the answer over here. Recommendations on specific types of healthy food. So comparison feature. Now, this itself could be an entire experience or some sort of a mini product as a whole. And it asked a very interesting question here is, will it be side-by-side nutritional comparison or will there be a scoring system? So somebody can ask you probably 10 questions about how this comparison works. How do you select items? What is comparison going to look like? What can you do after comparison, right? So there's going to be a couple of flows over here itself, right? So this is again an excellent question. And you can have a lot of answers. Smart suggestions. What algorithm or logic will drive the smart suggestions? Will it consider user preferences, part behavior, and current goals? And how will it evolve with over time, right? And the answer is again pretty simple here. It's based on the user's input and requirements over here that it's defined, and it would use that as suggestions. It will use that as the basis for giving you suggestions, right? Then you have the calorie intake, protein, and fat consumption. This itself, again, another whole product on its own in the app. So it says, first of all, ease of logging. So manual logging of complex meals. How will the app streamline the process to avoid user frustration? Will there be templates or saved meal options for frequently consumed meals? Right? This is again a solution. Nutritional breakdown. When breaking down complex meals, how will the app handle variations in ingredients and preparation methods, right? So essentially you could enter the ingredients and quantities, and preparation methods you can sort of ignore for now. Then real-time updates. How will the app update and display progress towards high goals? Will it include visual graphs like graphs or progress bars and keep the users engaged and informed? Education, engagement, and motivation, right? So all these parts we haven't really considered because we're just focusing on inputting, but you can see that there are a lot of questions for you to answer, right? So this becomes like an exam for you, and you have to sit down and write all the answers. And basically you have to think. And the more you think, you go into so much of depths and you go into the nitty-gritties of things, and that's how you end up becoming a better thinker. All right, so now let's move into the last part where we're going to look at KPIs and metrics. And also we're going to look at the screen layout of one particular screen. I'm going to come to this in a second, but let's just focus on metrics and KPIs right now. Now, essentially, if we assume that this app is a free app, right, and you don't need any subscription, it's a free to use app, it's going to be a little hard to define the metrics because typically metrics are dependent on what makes revenue for the company. And so you try to see what sort of actions or what sort of users or types of cohorts of users are going to generate revenue. And then that's how you define your active users and your metrics, right? But in this case, there's really not much we can actually, talk about. And I've only have two, daily active users and weekly active users, considering the two personas that we have, right? Persona 1 is probably just looking for information, and Persona 2 is also going to log and track their consumption, right? So there's a good chance that somebody who's a daily active user, or basically Persona 2, is going to log their food consumption at least once a day. And you can also track, weekly active users. And this could be somebody who's completing a successful search or is probably scanning the barcode or a food item or performing some action, right? And there's really not much else that's left to do. We can look at things like feature adoption rate and all of those things. But at the end of the day, I believe if we do these three things, it's going to be more than enough, right? So let's give this context to ChatGPT and see what it says. What I will do this time is I will not tell ChatGPT what I wrote down. Instead, I will wait for it to give me the answers, and then we will go ahead and challenge ChatGPT this time and try to understand why it recommended something and if we are missing something. Hey ChatGPT, so I want to focus on metrics and KPIs. I want you to help me out defining what should be the top three metrics or KPIs for this app. And a couple of things to keep in mind is that this is going to be a free app and all the features can be used by anybody without paying a single penny. It's completely free to use. And obviously, I want you to consider both the personas that we spoke about, and according to their needs and requirements, what do you think should be the appropriate KPIs? And let's just focus on the most three important metrics, and let's not dive into a lot of things like customer feedback or customer rating and things like that, right? So let me know what you think the key metrics should be.
Sure. For a free app focused on providing nutritional information and helping users make healthier eating choices, here are the top three metrics or KPIs to consider. Habsure 1, user engagement, daily active users DAU, monthly active users MAU. Track how many users are actively using the app on a daily and monthly basis. This will help you understand the app's stickiness and whether users find it valuable enough to return regularly. Session length. Measure how much time users spend in the app during each session. Longer session lengths can indicate that users are finding the app useful and engaging. Feature utilization. Number of searches and scans. Monitor how often users are utilizing the search and scan features to look up nutritional information. This will help you gauge which features are most valuable to your users and how frequently they are being used. Logging and tracking activities. Track the number of food items logged and the frequency of users updating their dietary intake. High usage of logging and tracking indicates that users are actively managing their nutrition through the app. 3. User retention. User retention rate. Measure how many users return to the app after their first use. This can be tracked over different periods, such as 1 day, 7 days, and 30 days after initial use. A high retention rate indicates that users find ongoing value in the app and are likely to continue using it over time. These KPIs will help you understand user engagement, the effectiveness of key features, and the app's ability to retain users. They are crucial for ensuring that the app is meeting the needs of both personas by providing valuable and actionable nutritional information. Do these metrics align with your goals for the app?
Okay, so I sort of disagree with a lot of things it said, but let's try to understand one by one. So first is user engagement. Essentially, I think in this case, user retention is basically how many users return to the app, right? And that is basically your daily active users, monthly active users. And I've always seen that ChatGPT makes mistakes in user engagement and user retention. I don't know why, but essentially in this case, user retention and engagement is the same, right? So first it's saying daily active users versus and monthly active users, but I chose weekly active users because this is a high frequency usage app, right? So one of the things that we can do is ask ChatGPT why not weekly and why monthly. So that's one. The second thing is we should sort of define what activities are considered as a daily active user. Just opening the app is not considered as a daily active user. You have to do something, right? The second thing is session length, which is something that I don't think anybody actually even measures. Session length proves absolutely nothing, to be very honest, unless an action is taken that is proof of something. Just because you spend less time on the app or more time on the app sort of doesn't mean anything, right? And I don't even think even apps like Instagram, they sort of measure session length. They see how many opens per day, how many shares, did they send a message, did they chat, did they view somebody's story, did they post, right? I think they always look at probably an action that's taken over session length. Maybe session length for social media apps is a secondary metric, but I don't think it's a primary metric. Next is feature utilization, number of scans and searches. So this is technically feature adoption rate. But like I said, if a user is completing a successful search or is doing a search or a scan, I think it should be fine to be considered as a daily active users, right? We don't really have to specifically measure number of searches or scans. As long as people are doing it and they're doing it successfully, I think that should be fine. And of course, logging and tracking activities is an action that users will take. So I think that's also been registered over here, right? Then user retention, I think this is being repeated, adds no value over here. So What I will do now is I will just question ChatGPT on why it chose monthly active users and maybe should we consider weekly active users, and also what should we consider as a daily or a weekly active user in this case. The answer we probably already know, but let's see if ChatGPT is helpful over here. Hey, so I had a quick question on the daily and monthly active users. Is there a reason you spoke about monthly active users and not weekly active users? Why can't we just use daily active users and weekly active users? Why do we have to choose monthly active users? And the second thing is, to be considered as an active user, what activities do you think a user should perform on the app in order to be considered a daily active user?
Good questions. Let's break down each part. Daily active users, you versus weekly active user effects versus monthly active users. Why include monthly active users? MAU. Long-term engagement. MAU provides a broader picture of user engagement over a longer period. It helps you understand the app's ability to retain users beyond the initial few days or weeks. Seasonal and monthly trends. Some users may have fluctuating usage patterns that are better captured on a monthly basis. For instance, someone might use the app more frequently at the beginning of a new health regime or after specific events like holidays. Why not just DAU and DAU? Balance, using all three metrics, DAU and MAU, gives a balanced view. DAU measures short-term engagement, W captures medium-term trends, and MAU shows long-term retention. Holistic view. Each metric provides different insights. For example, DAU can show daily habits, WAU can highlight weekly patterns, and MAU can help in understanding long-term user satisfaction. What activities qualify a user as active? To be considered an active user, a user should perform meaningful interactions within the app that align with its core functions. Here are some activities that could qualify. 1. Logging food items, actively logging meals or snacks. 2. Using search or scan features, searching for nutritional information or scanning food items to get details. 3. Tracking progress, updating or viewing their nutritional intake and progress toward dietary goals. 4. Viewing recommendations, interacting with food recommendations or personalized dietary suggestions. 5. Setting or updating goals, engaging with goal-setting features such as adjusting dietary preferences or fitness objectives. These activities ensure that the user is engaging with the core functionalities of the app, making the interaction meaningful and indicative of their active use. Does this address your questions?
Yes, but just a quick follow-up on that. If we still plan to use monthly active user, who would we consider as a monthly active user? What activities do they have to perform? And in what frequency do they have to perform to be considered as a monthly active user?
To be considered a monthly active user, MAU, a user should engage with the app in a way that reflects meaningful use over the course of the month. The frequency and types of activities can vary, but here are some guidelines. Activities to be considered a monthly active user. 1. Logging food items. The user logs meals or snacks at least a few times during the month. 2. Using search or scan features. The user searches for nutritional information or scans food items several times throughout the month. 3. Tracking progress. The user updates or views their nutritional intake and progress toward dietary goals at least a few times a month. 4. Viewing recommendations. The user interacts with food recommendations or personalized dietary suggestions periodically. 5. Setting or updating goals. The user engages with goal-setting features, such as adjusting dietary preferences or fitness objectives at least once a month. Frequency, minimum engagement. Engaging with any of the core activities at least once a week could be a reasonable threshold. This would mean that a user who performs any meaningful activity at least 4 times a month would be considered an MAU. Varied activities. It's also important to consider users who may use the app intensively for a short period. For example, a user who logs food items every day for a week but doesn't use the app for the rest of the month should still be considered active. By setting these thresholds, you ensure that the MAU metric reflects users who find ongoing value in the app and engage with it regularly, even if not daily. Does this help clarify how to define and measure MAUs?
So, if you actually see, the conversation here is pretty interesting, right? So, I started off by challenging over here, and it's really, well written. And the first question is basically, why your daily active users versus weekly versus monthly, right? And so it says MAU is for long-term engagement, but then at the end of the day, if I come down here and when I look at the part where it answered about being MAU, it said something very interesting. It's also important to consider users who may use the app intensely for a short period. For example, a user who logs food every day for a week but doesn't use the app for the rest of the month should still be considered active. Now, of course, this is a point of debate and this is just a brainstorming session. So this hypothesis or this reasoning may or may not be right. Right? Obviously, we need to talk to the leadership and understand what are their goals and define a lot more things. But if, for example, the app is going to become paid in the future, we are going to bring a subscription in the future, on what basis should we define what metrics to measure, right? Do we measure weekly or monthly active users, right? So I think this one point is quite important, which makes a lot of sense, right? And it's also suggesting what activities to be considered as a monthly active user, right? So logging food items, we already looked at that. Using search or scan features, we already did that. Tracking progress is updates their nutritional intake progress. I think this would somehow fall under logging your food consumption. I don't think you will update your dietary goals, even once. And I don't think it's important that you do. It's fine if you don't. That shouldn't be an action that you have to take. Viewing recommendations, I mean, not that super important, but I guess somebody who's just browsing the app might do it. But I don't think we would really consider these users because they're not really doing any action, so they're not valuable users. And setting and updating goals, very similar to tracking progress, right? So looks like we've got it all covered, to be honest. And even if you see here, it's pretty much the same thing, right? So I think these are the metrics that we can sort of go with and consider that these users are the ones who would be willing to give feedback, who are important to us, and who would be willing to pay if we made a paid product, all right? Great. Now, let's move on to the next part, which is defining the screen layout. Now, I'm going to be looking at only one screen, which is basically the details screen of a particular food item, right? And so what I've done is I've written down the order of sections over here. So first we would have an image. Then we would have an overall health rating. So there would be some sort of percentage or some meter or something like that that defines the overall healthiness of this product. Maybe it could also have in what quantities to consume. I'm not entirely sure. Then you would have some key characteristics such as, is it high in fiber, low in fiber? Is it high in fat, low in fat? And similar for palm oil and sugar. Then it will get the calories and macronutrients per serving, or this would be basically per 100 grams. We could consider that. And then micronutrients, which is basically your vitamins, minerals. Ingredients, if it's actually a packaged food item. Then we could also show similar items. So if it's something that you like and you want to see similar items with similar composition, then you could see that. And of course, if you want a healthier option of that, then you can choose this, right? So for example, if you choose mayonnaise, then maybe it can suggest a healthier, low-fat mayonnaise, right? For example, I'm just taking an example over here. So this is what I came up with. Now, this time again, we'll run this with ChatGPT, and this time I will not give the overall screen layout. Let it suggest, and then we will see if it does a really good job. All right, thank you for that. Now I want to move on to the next part, which is defining the order of sections in a particular screen. And this screen is basically the detailed screen of a particular food item, right? So considering both the personas and the information that they're looking for, what do you think should be the overall order of sections in this particular screen?
To create an intuitive and user-friendly detailed screen for a food item, it's important to prioritize the most essential and frequently sought-after information, while also making it easy for users to navigate through additional details. Here's a suggested order of sections. 1. Food item name and image. Display the name of the food item prominently at the top. Include a high-quality image of the food item for visual reference. Basic nutritional summary. Provide a quick overview of the key nutritional information such as calories, macronutrients, carbs, proteins, fats, and serving size. Use icons or visual aids to make this information easy to digest at a glance. Healthiness rating. Show a healthiness rating or score, taking into account the user's dietary preferences, allergies, and fitness goals. Provide a brief explanation of why the food item has received this rating, e.g. high in protein but also high in sugar. Serving size options. Offer various serving size options, e.g. small, medium, large for bananas, teaspoons, tablespoons for oil. Allow users to select or adjust the serving size to see how the nutritional information changes. Detailed nutritional information. Expand on the basic summary with more detailed data, including micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, fiber content, etc. Present this information in a clear tabular format. 6. Ingredients. List the ingredients, particularly for processed or packaged foods. Highlight any common allergens. 7. Additives and preservatives. Include information on any additives or preservatives present in the food item. 8. User reviews and ratings. Allow users to leave reviews and rate the food item based on their experience. Display an average rating and some recent reviews. Recommendations and comparisons. Suggest alternative food items or similar foods that may be healthier or offer different nutritional benefits. Allow users to compare the current food item with others. 10. Logging and tracking. Include a button to log this food item directly into their dietary tracker. Provide options to add notes or specify when and how much they consumed. By organizing the screen this way, you prioritize the most critical information while still providing easy access to more detailed data. This structure should cater well to both personas, offering quick insights for general users and in-depth information for those with specific fitness or health goals. Does this order align with your vision for the app?
All right. So if you heard that, I think it did a pretty great job, right? So if we quickly want to recap. So it said food item and image, we already got that. Then it started off with basic nutritional summary. So it started off by showing calories, macronutrients, fats, etc. So that's over here. This is the second thing it suggested. We probably put it under 4th. Healthiness rating, which is basically number 2. Here it suggested number 3. Not really a big deal. If you sort of interchange them, it's not going to impact the experience that much. Then serving size option, I combined it with calories, carbs, and proteins because that makes more sense than the health rating. Detailed nutritional information such as micronutrients, fiber content, etc., which would come over here. Then you have ingredients, additives, and preservatives. And then it suggested user ratings and reviews. Now, I don't think that's really that helpful because I don't understand what value anybody could get. This is information that is set in stone, so I don't really think it adds any value. Recommendations and comparisons. So again over here, similar items and healthier options, well done. And also logging and tracking. Of course, this is not something we should add to the screen, but would make much sense. So if you were to look at a particular food item, then it can show you if you logged that for a particular day or a particular week or whatever that is, right? So I think we got some really cool information over here and, very nice validation over here. Now I will try another thing and I will go ahead and tell the order that I chose and ask it to challenge this, right? So let's quickly check that out. Hey, so thank you for that. What I will do is I will tell you the order that I decided and please challenge me and ask me any questions. So I would start off with the image and the name of the product, and then I will define the overall health rating for that, considering the user's preferences and needs that have been predefined. The third would then be key characteristics such as is it high in fiber or low in fiber, high in fat, low in fat, does it have more palm oil, does it have more sugar, just key characteristics. These could be positive or negative characteristics. Then the fourth section would basically be calories, carbs, proteins, and fats per 100 grams or per serving. Then I would have macronutrients and then ingredients and preservatives. And then I would have similar items. And then the last one would be healthier options if it's an unhealthy product. What do you think of this? And do challenge me over here.
Your proposed order seems well thought out and covers essential information comprehensively. Here are a few points and questions to consider that might help refine the structure. Number 1, image and name of the product. This makes sense as a starting point since it gives users an immediate visual reference and context. 2, overall health rating. Including the health rating early on is a good idea as it provides a quick assessment. How do you plan to visually represent this rating? Will there be a color code, numerical score, or descriptive label? 3, key characteristics. This section is useful, but it might be more effective to place it after the basic nutritional summary, calories, carbs, proteins, fats, since users might look for the primary nutritional information first. What do you think about switching these two sections? calories, carbs, proteins, and fats. This is crucial information, and placing it near the top ensures that users see it quickly. 5. Macronutrients. It might be helpful to clarify what you mean by macronutrients here, since you've already mentioned carbs, proteins, and fats in the previous section. Do you mean micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals? 6. Ingredients and preservatives. This is essential for users with allergies or specific dietary restrictions. 7. Similar items. This is a great addition for users looking for alternatives. How do you plan to differentiate similar items from healthier options? Could this potentially be merged with the healthier options section, or should it remain distinct? 8. Healthier options. This is a valuable feature. How will you define healthier? Will it be based on fewer calories, lower fat content, or another metric? Potential adjustments. User reviews and ratings. Consider adding a section for user feedback. This can help new users trust the information and get insights from others with similar goals. Logging and tracking. Adding a quick link or button to log the food item directly into the user's dietary tracker could enhance usability. Questions to reflect on. 1. How do you plan to gather and display the health rating? Will it be customizable based on the user's specific goals? 2. How will you ensure that the key characteristics are clear and not overwhelming? 3. Is there a way to visually differentiate between key characteristics and detailed nutritional information to prevent information overload? 4. For similar items and healthier options, how will you source and prioritize these recommendations? Your order is logical and user-friendly, but these adjustments and reflections might help in making it even more effective. What do you think?
All right, so as you can see, this one was pretty amazing, right? And I'm not going to go into all of them. I'm just going to look at the questions to reflect on. And to be very honest, these are questions that can easily come to you in a whiteboarding round. So the first question is, how do you plan to gather and display the health rating? And I think we already mentioned that it would be some sort of a graph or a percentage. We don't know, right? But that's something for you to think about when you're sort of designing the screen, right? Will it be customizable based on the user specific goals? Of course, we already discussed that. How will you ensure that the key characteristics are clear and not overwhelming? Again, this is more of a UI task, but this is something that's great to know. Is there a way to visually differentiate key characteristics and nutritional information, right? So key characteristics and other nutritional information, how do you go about differentiating that? Again, something to consider when you're designing the screen. And for similar and healthier options, how will you source and prioritize these recommendations? Definitely not a question for us. This is basically a very high level product management question. One other question that I want to quickly talk about is this. I think this thing that it said was felt like a human being saying it. So similar items, how do you differentiate similar items from healthier options? Could this potentially be merged with healthier options, or should it remain distinct? I think this is a phenomenal question, and this is something a person would definitely ask in this exact tone of voice, right? So sometimes similar could be unhealthy options, right? So if there's an unhealthy product, you want to see similar items for that, so you could see it. But if it's a healthy option, then you might see other healthier options, right? But what this means that if there is a healthy item that you have sort of looking at, similar items could also be healthy and healthier options could also be healthy, right? So it's fine. So, right, that would be the answer that I would give. Another very interesting thing here is that it might be helpful. So I said micronutrients, but I think it heard it as macronutrients, or maybe I said macronutrients, I don't remember. But it spoke to me in a very human way where it said it might be helpful to clarify what do you mean by macronutrients, because you already mentioned carbs, proteins, and fats in the previous section. Or do you mean micronutrients, right? So it's able to really understand me like a human being and reply as a human being. So I think we're pretty sorted with the screen layout. Now the final thing is I will upload an image of a screen and ask it to suggest changes depending on what we've discussed. So I'm going to make this full screen. And we'll go here and upload an image. All right, so I've added this image from this app that I found online. And this is basically looking at a particular item. And of course, the UI is terrible over here, but we can still learn from this. And if you guys want to redesign this app, you can do it as a project. It's called Truthin, Truthin, something like that. You can search for it and you can do it. And of course, you can clean up the UI. But let's see if it sort of provides us with valuable feedback. And so this is basically the entire screen. And the question that I'm going to ask it is, considering everything we have discussed and spoken about so far, how do you feel do you feel this screen solves the user's goals? If not, what changes would you suggest? And let's run that and see what sort of a response we get. All right, so we got some information, and let me try to open this on the side so we can sort of compare both of them side by side. Right, so first of all, strengths, it's already showing us the strengths, which is good. So the product name and image are clearly displayed, providing immediate context. The health rating is prominently shown, which helps user quickly access the healthiness of a product. Serving size selector is also quite intuitive, allowing users to adjust the serving. Positives and negatives, which is basically this section, which is what is it in good and what is negative about it. The breakdown and negative is clear and color coded for quick understanding, which is good. Although it's quite weird that even though it says positives, you're showing green, and negatives, it's showing red. So maybe it's sort of being repeated, or why that's really important. Also, I don't know what is the difference between the one on the left and one on the right. What is the difference? Not quite sure what that is, right? Additional information section for all ingredients, product tags, and comments provide deeper insights. Now, areas of improvement. Let's see. It might be beneficial to provide context or a brief explanation of the health rating, especially to new users. What does 2.2 rating mean in practical terms? What does that actually mean, right? Is it 2.2 out of 5? Is it 2.2 out of 10? And how is that 2.2 defined, right? I think that's important to understand. Then user-specific recommendations. So incorporate a section for user-specific recommendations or warnings based on dietary preferences. For example, if a user is allergic to gluten, a warning could appear next to the ingredients list, right? Which makes a lot of sense, right? So you look at ingredients and then you say if there's something that it's not good for a particular user, quickly call that out, right? More detailed nutritional information includes vitamins, minerals, and other macronutrients, and this could be important for users with specific dietary needs. So if you tap on know more, you actually get it. But since that's not visible on the screen, like I can't know how much calories is it, how many proteins, fats, or carbohydrates it has. An interactive feature like compare button to compare the current item with healthier alternatives. So obviously we could add that as a new feature. Clear serving size impact. Well, the serving size selector is useful, providing a clear visual impact of the changing on the overall health could be helpful. For instance, showing a dynamic change in the health or daily intake. So if you change it, of course, you would see that over here. I think it's pretty straightforward. I don't know if ChatGPT wasn't able to pick that up. And then user ratings and reviews, including user ratings. This could be integrated in the comment section, which we decided that we would not do. And actionable insights. Offer actionable insights like try a healthier alternative, limit intake to once a week can help, right? So this is excellent. So telling a user on how to consume this is super important, and that would be great, right? So it's also given us the revised section order, which we had sort of already discussed, right? So as you can see, just by using ChatGPT, there is so much that you can actually learn. And the more number of problem statements you solve, and the more you question and you practice and build that environment and try to get feedback, you will end up doing a phenomenal job. And there are multiple ways to learn from this, as I've shown throughout the video, right? Finally, to end the video, if you do end up making this app or designing screens, do send it to me. I would love to review it. This is like an open invitation to everyone, right? So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you did, let me know in the comment section down below. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more amazing, awesome content. And I'll see you guys in my next video soon. Take care. Bye.